Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Citizen concerns. The next thing on old business, I have location of splash pad water line, Rotary Park. Do you know any information on that?
The only item that we've been working on is the Rotary Park Pavilion and the location of a sanitary sewer line.
It was mentioned, I believe, back in possibly January, I think it was January. There was discussion, and I think you made mention that possibly we could share the water line along with, for the bathrooms for the Rotary Pavilion.
There is a water line located within Rotary Park that's wholly within city property that could be available. I'm not sure what the sizing is on that. That's one of the things that we're still researching is how many gallons per minute a splash pad utilizes and what diameter of pipe you need to feed that, as well as storm to drain that, and we don't have that information yet.
Okay, well, I don't think we're looking at anything like Las Vegas, but we're looking at something nice that would be going in there. Can you let us know by the next meeting if you have more info on that?
Yes, we should. Some of us are going on a tour of another facility, one that newly opened, so we should be able to collect some of that data.
Thank you very much. Riverside Park cannon stands, does anybody have anything on that? Okay. Inclusive Playground, Ryan Wickman from Wood County Plays and his wife Kaylee is here tonight. And would both of you like to come up, or one of you like to talk about that?
Yeah. She'll shove me up here. Hi. I'd like to first give an update where we stand from our last meeting that we were all at 2 months ago when I first approached you with an idea of bringing an inclusive playground to Perrysburg. Very happy to report the progress that's been made. We had our first informational meeting, which I know several of you were at last Monday. It was well attended by over 50 citizens to bring the idea of an inclusive playground to Perrysburg. We have formed a steering committee for Wood County Plays. We are actively recruiting and organizing a community committee, which is going to be made up of citizens and parents to help us with fundraising, marketing, education, and everything that goes along with a playground design to make sure that we're putting everything 100% together inside of this. I put together a packet that you guys can go ahead and share if you'd like. I didn't make enough, I apologize. Figured we could all play nice. Just to talk, the first page talks about some of the concerns or what the need is in the community. It also has an initial rendering on this. I know some of you have already seen an initial rendering. We have it on our website, wcplays.org. You'll notice all sorts of equipment that's on there, from musical equipment, sensory equipment, accessibility, and different play range equipment. Some that's 5 to 12, others that's 2 to 5 years old. So we're trying to make sure that it is inclusive for everybody. The second page, you're going to see kids in the community. One of them is ours. He's got a nice picture on there. Grant. It talks about what an inclusive playground would mean for different citizens and families within the city of Perrysburg. And on the last page, you're going to find the thought process that's going into this inclusive playground. Here you go, Jim.
Cheers.
Yeah, there you go. We have some fantastic people on our steering committee that are helping us, OTs, PTs. We're working on bringing potentially speech on board as well to make sure that the equipment that's included in this playground is not just cool looking, it's not just innovative, but it's actually practical and it's what the community needs and it's going to fit what we're looking at. So we've done a lot of work, and I'm here today to ask, as we really sink our teeth into doing a fundraising for this, because we are trying to do this all from fundraising, that land on the north side of Rotary Community Park, if we could have that set aside so that when we go do our fundraising, people know where this playground is going to be built. Right now, I think we'd feel more secure if we have that. So I also have a quick picture on here. This is not 100% accurate, but I just want to give you an idea. I've got another one here. I want to give you another picture. So we're looking at doing a 100 by 100 foot playground in that space just north of where the proposed Rotary Pavilion is going to go. That's what we're really aiming for is putting a playground in there. We're totally opening to move it to the left, to the right, but I just wanted you to see in that space, in that park, what size a 100 by 100 playground would fit. So I'm basically here asking if we can have some land set aside and move forward with it.
Do you have some thoughts, Chuck?
Wait a minute. Take some of this out.
There's a lot there.
Who laid this out?
Me. It was just a Google map.
It was just to get an idea of the size.
Yeah.
Okay.
I made sure that the playground was 100 by 100. I tried to get as close as I could to the Rotary Pavilion, and the splash pad is just kind of thrown out there for an average size of a splash pad.
Do we know this is where the pavilion would be going?
That was initially discussed.
I think that is very close to the location, based on the master plan that will be coming before city council, I think on July 30th. That will be very, very close. This, actually, Councilman Tuesday, this rendering right here would be the new Rotary Pavilion. And then this location is currently where there's just a flex field space, whether it be for soccer or lacrosse.
And again, on that rendering, it's pretty rough. I just threw a sidewalk in there to show, but I mean, totally open to doing whatever we would need. Yeah.
The question I have on that is with the master plan, that's I believe what is going to be in front of the committee here today. Am I correct in that? Or is it just the agreement? Okay.
Right.
So there is a master plan for the park, and it actually had to go through planning commission. So I believe if anything was to be set aside, it would actually have to start there with the change to the master plan to make sure it fits the setbacks and everything else. That's just my understanding of how this master plan worked for this park. And I believe, is there another master plan within the city or on another park, or is it?
There is one that we are seeking out that could be, we are under the impression there might be one for River Crest itself. So we're tracking that down. But currently, you are correct, Councilman Smith, that this document that's going to be coming before you July 30th, that went through the Planning Commission process, and it currently does not show a playground and or a splash pad. So in order to incorporate those, it would go back through that Planning Commission process after somebody had relayed out the park.
I mean, it's nothing. I don't think anybody's against trying to put this in the parks here in the city. It's just trying to make sure we go through the right steps and processes in order to do that. So that's my only feedback and suggestion on that.
My thoughts on that is I fully support what you're doing, you and Kaylee both, and I think it's a wonderful project, and I'm ready to go whenever we can do it.
You made this 100 by 100. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Do you have have you put together like an inventory of the playground equipment and stuff like that?
I have. Let me see if I have something.
Okay. So the 100 by 100 is not just an arbitrary amount, it's something laid out.
No. It does. Let me see if I've got a good one for you. That's a good layout. We initially did 100 by 100, partially because it is fairly easy to run some of the numbers with that, but the equipment that we were looking for, there's that. There's also more of a CAD layout. You can see that's probably the better one that we have here. So you're going to see different features. I'll go back to the microphone. But you'll see different features on that playground. Some of them are swings. So you have typical normal swings and you have inclusive swings that are on there. You'll see a merry-go-round that is set to 0 depth, so somebody in a wheelchair or a walker could go straight into it. There's musical equipment that's on the one picture and rendering. For sensory use there. There's a big ropes course that you'll see on there as well. That's something that's inclusive. Somebody in a walker or wheelchair could go inside of that and use that space and play with their friends while other children are crawling and going around them. There's the master, I would call it superstructure that's on there as well. So a lot of thought has been put into this, but we still have more fine tuning for the exact equipment that's going to go in here, but 100 by 100 would fit the needs.
I think I should mention, actually, I should have you mention that you were given, you and your group were given $50,000 from the Wood Lane Foundation on July 8th. And everybody publicly saw the presentation, so that was really great. So that's going.
We were very fortunate. So Wood County Plays is an entity within the Wood Lane Foundation. I should have mentioned that before. So we are working within the Wood Lane Foundation, and to that end, we went to the Wood County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and they give us a $50,000 grant as kind of a Kickstarter for this, because they see the need. Without a truly all-inclusive playground in Wood County right now, this would be and will be the first one.
Give an estimate of the cost.
Of the actual equipment itself that goes in there, somewhere in the neighborhood about $350,000 for that equipment. And then the square footage for the poured rubber, which is what we're going to do, is around $20 a square foot. So that comes out to just slightly less than $200,000 for that. So when you add both of those together, it's slightly more than $500,000 for the equipment and the surfacing. We will also be putting in fencing for security and safety around the playground as well as obviously the other costs that come with putting in something like this.
And then didn't you have, you had mentioned, I think at the meeting, what possibly with the splash pad would be the cost on that?
There's all sorts of costs for a splash pad. It depends if you want to go for a spray fountain, a glorified spray fountain. You could do that for somewhere in a $50,000 to $100,000 range. And if you want to go full bore, I mean, you can go as high as you want, but our cost estimate was somewhere around $100,000 to $150,000 for a splash pad.
And just so, if I recall correctly from that same meeting, that was incorporating the actual end goal, correct?
Correct. The end goal is somewhere between $650,000 and $750,000 is what we're hoping to fundraise for this project to see it to its conclusion. Most likely what may have to happen is we'll have to do a phase 1, phase 2 with it, where phase 1 would be the playground. We view that as by far the more important of the two structures. But a splash pad fulfills two things. One, it's a cooling station for children that overheat, that have disabilities, which happens quite frequently. And number two, it turns this from what some might view as the handicap playground in Perrysburg to a destination. And a lot of children, like my son Grant, are motivated by other children around him. And so we want to bring as many kids to this playground as we possibly can as a motivational factor for kids of all abilities.
I like the inclusive idea. I think that's very, very nice. And I think you mentioned at the meeting that you would like to have like one swing set regular, one swing on the swing set regular for regular, and then another one that would be specially done.
Yeah, so the idea is you want dual play. You want a typically developing child next to a child who might have special needs and have them working together. So not only does that child who's typically developing see the abilities and what a special needs child can do, instead of seeing them for their walker or their wheelchair, they see them for what they can do. That other child is going to see what a fully abled or a typically developing child is able to do and be motivated by that and want to reach what they're doing. I know that firsthand from our son. He sees the kids in his classroom and what they can do, and he gets totally ticked off when he can't do the things that they're doing because he's limited by his walker and his inability to walk on his own right now. And so it's a motivating factor for him. And there's going to be lots of kids in this community that are going to do the same thing on this playground.
One question is, can we get the palm trees and the beach next to the walls?
We'll throw in the beach towels too.
Did you have any more questions, Jim?
No, that wasn't at that prior meeting. Has it pretty much been settled that Rotary Park is going to be the location for this?
That is the hope.
That's the hope. It's a centralized location with the growth of Perrysburg for a number of reasons too. The bathrooms that are eventually going to be built with the Rotary Pavilion that are being put in there, that'll be ADA compliant. That's a good starting point for us. A lot of other parks don't have bathroom facilities that would be close by, or the parking facilities that would be close by to this as well.
So the hope is that it's got to go through that planning commission.
It would have to be a master plan change in order for that to occur.
Okay.
Do you know when your next planning commission meeting would be regarding that?
The planning commission is a citizen board. So
And
that
it
would,
would have to be presented with
You mean-
the
you mean
architectural
plan
drawing.
that's where,
Okay, rather than planning. Okay, got it.
yeah, when we would plan, so we would start out the planning
Right.
commission.
Okay. When do they meet next?
The current master plan proposed amendment is scheduled for a special P and Z committee meeting on July 30th at, I believe, 6 o'clock. And then city council has a public hearing on the proposed master plan revision when they convene their meeting at 6:30 that same night.
What does the current master plan have in that area?
The current master plan, I don't think has anything denoted at this point in time, but it may actually have something.
I have it in my office.
So it does go, that's why.
It would go to the zoning committee on the 30th at 6 p.m. prior to.
The new
But that's for
proposed.
the proposed one.
The proposed doesn't have this incorporated.
Correct.
Correct.
What would the council be voting on, whether or not to accept the proposed plan?
They actually don't have to vote on it. What council will be considering that night would be the resolution adopting an agreement with Rotary for the construction of the pavilion.
Just for the,
Right, and so prior to council adopting that agreement, we wanted council and the P and Z committee to actually hear the master plan amendment. Typically, you would hold your public hearing and then refer it to P and Z. We asked Councilman McCarthy, who's chair of P and Z, if he would give consideration to having his committee meet prior to the public hearing so that they had a chance to review it.
so we really were,
Nothing with regards to the inclusive playground, though, is included in that master plan.
if we were to be doing anything that would be excluding that possibility, would we be?
No, the process would just work through its typical channels.
Yeah, it would go back, I mean, if that proposal is made, then an architect has to come on board, redo the master plan map, then it would go through the planning commission process,
Okay.
and then ultimately come back to city council.
So basically, we're going to approve an agreement with Rotary for the pavilion, which I think we're going to know where it's going to go, where it's going to sit.
Exactly.
Yeah, that will pinpoint that
So that
location.
piece of the master plan will be implemented.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
It doesn't mean it can't be changed again. It's just-
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
And also was, if I'm not mistaken, I think in the original plan, the Rotary plan, there was a splash pad put in there, if I recall.
I
From
think it was
2008, I think.
Very original one, there
Yeah.
was a water feature, water park.
Right.
The rain garden, retention pond, kind of took that out. If I recall correctly.
Yes. I believe that is correct. I have a variety of maps here, some of which were in draft form. This is a proposed one. So this must be the latest master plan that was approved. And in that area, it shows, I think that might be an outdoor water park,
Cool.
which is now not in the revised master plan that went through the plan commission process.
What is in that, the most recent one, and the location where he's got this?
In the proposed location, it's just essentially the pavilion, and then this has to actually, cannot be part of the master plan because the setbacks, it does not meet the setbacks for the field. So it's just a field that's utilized still as a flex field space, but just not called out specifically on the master plan.
So that, where you drew your square. Has not been given any particular.
Correct.
Okay.
particular use
Through the
yet,
master plan
Or
process.
for what's going to take place at the end of the month.
I'd like to call dibs.
Just making sure we're on the same page, that's all. So,
All right, so it sounds like I need to talk to planning and zoning.
I like your enthusiasm.
I don't think that is zoning.
Have to make a recommendation.
You could, I guess you could work with Brody because they will need, there's certain requirements and documents that need to be provided.
Yep.
And then he then shepherds it through that process once he has them.
Okay.
But I could just have Brody reach out to you tomorrow.
Okay.
How about if we make a motion, and we make a motion for Ryan Rickman and Wood County Plays to go from our committee to go to the Planning and Zoning Committee with his possible
I
plans.
think he needs to go to
He has to go to
administration.
planning commission after he goes to administration, go to planning commission and
So it has to
council.
be reviewed by Brody to make sure it meets the set requirements and everything else first. I would feel more comfortable to make sure that the design fits with the current code, so that way there's no issues at that point. So once it goes there, I think the ball can start rolling.
Okay.
And I don't think is there any feedback? I mean, that's just my 2 cents on that, but I'm assuming that would start at Rotary and then go from there.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea and it's needed.
We'll make sure we take the proper steps and get it done the right way, and we'll make it happen.
Doesn't sound like there's any obstacles in it.
Doesn't seem
Other than just going through the process.
Yeah,
That's always the fun part.
I know. It's to be expected.
That's
Good.
Anybody else? Yes.
May I?
Yes, come on, speak your name. I think we know your name, but go ahead and speak your name.
Jim Hagan, 10741 Avenue Road. I just had a couple questions. I think it's a great idea for this playground, but I'm just wondering since I know they're in the planning stage, and I'm guessing that at some point, if this comes to fruition, that the city is going to be the one that's going to be maintaining it and taking care of repairs. Am I correct in assuming that?
I don't know.
Then I would wonder, would it not be wise, perhaps, to at least somebody from people that are going to have to maintain it to be also maybe have an input into the actual deciding on what they are going to put in terms of, so you don't end up with something, two things. As I know has happened in the past, you get a company that is been in business for 5 years, they give you a terrific price, and they're gone in 5 years. All right, you've got a playground you can't get parts for, and it becomes obsolete. So I would hope that they at least can take a look at that, as well as the practical aspects of how to maintain it and how difficult it is to be maintained. There may be one set that is really cheap, but it's going to be very expensive to keep it up. There may be another one that's going to cost you more up front, but it'll save you down the road. I'm just asking you that maybe it'd be good to have somebody from the city involved in that it actually is going to be doing the work on that at this early stage before we get to the point where, decisions have already been made.
It's well said.
And my only other thought is on the splash pad. I'm curious if that $150,000 figure I hear, does that include the pump house and the pumps and everything else, or is that just merely the structure for the pad?
The one, I believe, Brian, did you want to speak to that you spoke about?
Most of that is just for the structure, but since we're not looking at putting in a giant splash pad that's going to need a lot of water flowing through it, it likely wouldn't need more of a formal pump house like a larger splash pad.
There would still be a filtration system that's going to be needed for.
Not necessarily. There's two ways you can do a splash pad. You can do it through reclamation, which is what you're talking about, a filtration system that keeps recirculating, or you can do a domestic system, yeah.
Yeah. I've not heard as high as 150. I've heard as high as 125. At least the estimates I've had. I don't know what.
Unless you're talking the Las Vegas one.
Yeah, I don't think we want Las Vegas here. Maybe some people do. Does anybody else have anything else? Okay, moving on. I have done a crosswalk across Fort Meigs between Rotary and Rivercrest Parks, and this was brought to me actually by a citizen, and I'm just throwing it out there to see if there's any discussion regarding it.
Have you heard from him since he made that recommendation?
I have not. I just kept it out there just in case.
I thought it was mentioned briefly at the PrAC meeting, if I recall correctly, but
It was briefly, and I believe that individual reached out to the public service director.
okay.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Under new business, consideration of an agreement with Perrysburg Rotary Club for the installation of a Rotary Park pavilion. And you all should have this in front of you about the resolution authorizing the city to enter into an agreement with PRC Park LLC and contribute $35,000 toward the construction of a park pavilion at the Perrysburg Rotary Community Park and declaring an emergency. Somebody have any thoughts on that?
The only thing I can say is I was advised that I would be abstaining from this agreement as a member of Rotary, even though there isn't any financial gain for me. It is perceived conflict, so I will be abstaining from this agreement.
Okay, well, thank you. What are your thoughts, Jim?
No? Let me read it.
Okay, sure.
Chairman Bourne, would you like me to give a summary as to what the agreement, the substance of the agreement states?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in accordance with council's direction in January, if you remember, you passed a resolution unanimously supporting the placement of a pavilion on behalf of Rotary, the Rotary Club at Rotary Park. The administrations worked closely with the Rotary in putting together this agreement. Essentially, you have $35,000 in the 2019 budget that was earmarked for the utility work that would be necessary in the event that Rotary does proceed with a bathroom facility at the pavilion. I think there's still some discussion as to whether or not that comes in phase 1 or phase 2. What we've done is we've taken your previous agreements with PRC Park LLC, and that is the limited liability company that Rotary formed when the park was created. We've taken the previous agreements that the city had with them and essentially just conformed it to the Instant project, which is the construction of the pavilion. You'll see that as far as some of the legal terms within the Rotary or PRC Park LLC will carry their own general liability insurance with regards to the pavilion during construction. Once it's inspected and accepted by the city, that would then become the property of the city. They would no longer have to carry that. I've worked today, in particular, had some email conversations and some telephone conversations with Susan Nelson, who was representing Rotary in this matter, helping to advise on it. So this would, if recommended by the committee, we would like to place this on the agenda for City Council's consideration on July 30th. That would help to accommodate Rotary's construction schedule with regards to moving forward with the actual construction of the pavilion. Again, this was the subject of the master plan for Rotary Park that has shepherded through almost through to the end of the process. So we'll have a couple of Rotary items for council to review. So any questions you specifically have, but all we're looking for this evening is a recommendation to move forward in conformance with Resolution 4, 2019 and our discussions that we've had also with regards to the budget and supporting this project.
Any questions, Jim?
So PRC, what's it called, PRC?
PRC Park LLC, yes.
That was not formed solely for the purpose of this pavilion.
Not necessarily this pavilion, it was formed when they constructed the park itself, and it is still in existence, and they're choosing to use it in this project. And that was, I think, to maintain some level of consistency because the officership within Rotary changes over from time to time, so they have that LLC separately to make do what they need to do for the capital improvements.
So a $35,000 contribution, capital contribution by the city would get capital contribution to the LLC?
Yes, essentially it would be, it's a reimbursement to the LLC.
It's a reimbursement?
Yes.
It's not a capital contribution, it's just a...
It would be a reimbursement and it would be payable upon final invoicing and bills and inspection.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
With the overall structure there.
There's-
Once I read it,
Yeah, if there's anything else that you would have, certainly we've got plenty of time until the 30th to make any modifications.
Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I just read through it. A bunch of things come to mind, and I'll just shoot you.
Let me know.
Would it be appropriate to move from an ordinance presented by the law director to go to the July 30th council meeting?
That's what you guys just voted on.
Yes, that is when we would like to help accommodate, I know the schedule that Rotary's asking, requested.
Okay. All right, I move that the ordinance presented by the law director go to the July 30th council meeting.
Okay, I agree.
Okay, 2-0, Mary Jo.
Right now, we have a PDF of the site plan and the site location, very similar to what you were just looking at.
Also, we have, this is per Jonathan Smith, the discussion of the creation of a new city park near Cocourt.
So this is kind of brought to mind with the Rotary Park and the potential loss of land that was mentioned in numerous occasions by the service director at the time. That would have one fewer field space potentially over at Rotary Park. So it got me thinking, and I had a brief conversation with Bridget as well as Brody and John on this one day in the basement looking over the city maps. And there is some property south of Cocourt. This isn't anything that needs to be done immediately, or there's no pressing time frame on this. But there's two different parcels here. One is zoned scenic. It's owned by the city already. The other is zoned R3. My thought is that we look at potentially rezoning those two parcels to a park without the let me see here, where am I at here? No need to actually go through and say that we're going to create a full-fledged park at this time, but have that ability down the road if needed. A good portion of this property, I believe it was the Howell Estates, if I remember correctly, is wooded, and my intention would be not to remove the woodland at this point, but to have this as more of a passive park that kind of similar to what you see down in Orleans, or if you go over to side cuts over on the towpath side, where it doesn't have anything necessarily set in stone, but a passive park that can be walked through with maybe a path that goes through the wooded area as well as the lamps. And I believe, and I'm going to look at Bridget on this right now because it looks like a portion of this is being farmed right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have an agreement, I believe, Carver lives off of Roachton Road
Okay.
to farm that property.
And I don't think there would be any intentions to make this immediate, but something to chew on, and maybe put some of the residents at ease that this property isn't going to go anywhere else as well.
Is this the property that we discussed a year ago or 2 years ago that was zoned S1? We had a discussion on what S1 was.
Yes,
What you can and can't do with it.
correct.
This is that property.
Yes, it is that, and the property that is just east of it that is contiguous. You might recall that when Dr. Rich was doing platting out Hawthorne, that we did like a land swap with him. So that is that property. Part of it is wooded, zone scenic. The other portion, which we swapped some scenic land. So his property is R1, and they're contiguous to each other. But to create a parkland there, you would have to rezone it all park. You can't put equipment or any kind of buildings on a scenic zone.
And if I remember right, people in close proximity to that scenic park were very concerned that that stayed a scenic park. That's why they bought the houses that they bought, because they backed up to.
There was a variety of concerns by some of the property owners that are adjacent to that. Anything ranging from they enjoy that natural viewpoint all the way to their realtor told them it would never be developed, kind of thing.
What I recall here was that they said none of it was going to be developed back there.
Almost of.
But my hope is that to keep this more of a passive, not anything grandiose in thought, but just enough to turn into some sort of usable path. Think of probably even a lesser version of the bicentennial at that point. But just I would say Orleans is probably a better example of what my thought process is of this.
My thoughts on this would be, we've already got 12 parks. I don't think we need more, and it's hard enough for them to maintain them as it is. So I would say at this point, I'm not about creating another park. We've already got enough to maintain.
we have any maintenance, the city have any responsibility for maintaining any of that?
Right now, we don't have any concerns or issues, because again, part of it is wooded, and the other portion that is farmland is currently farm
I
forest.
wouldn't go either way on it, I just commented on what's happened in the past, just to remind you that that's gonna probably.
Oh, either way, my thought process is as well is you have two parcels zoned completely different. If it's going to stay scenic or go to a park, I think it would behoove us to look at trying to maintain the consistent zoning if that's the case.
That's what the public wants, and I'm okay with it.
I haven't heard any demand for it, but, you know, being out and about. But I just think that's more money that we could be spending elsewhere, maintaining parks, doing Ryan's project, if need be, any water service, if you will, to it. So I would say that I'm not for that.
So if we were to look at trying to make sure it's consistently zoned scenic without any cost to the city, do you think that that would be appropriate?
I don't know that anything's ever set in stone, so I would say probably I would not be for another park. We've already got 12. I think we've got more than most cities, actually.
I do recall from my time talking to citizens as well is that they want to see more parks out on the western side of town. Now, again, this isn't anything that I would say is going to be happening overnight, but I do believe it would be in the best interest of the city to have these consistently zoned. There's no intention of transferring that currently zoned R3 property anywhere else, just for the sake of consistency. Even if it's going to scenic, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
I don't know if anybody's thought about going to the Black Swamp. Have you thought about that and protecting it? And that way it's never going to be developed.
I said if you could go to scenic or go to park.
Well, Black Swamp is not park. They just protect the land and it can't be developed.
So the zone would be changed.
If it were to be that, but that wouldn't be a park, but it would be protected. Anybody else have any other questions, thoughts? Okay.
So did you,
I wanted to
you understand where I'm at?
No, I do. And maybe if it would be prudent, maybe this would be something to send down to PrAC to have them review and have a conversation on to see what their thoughts are. I think that would be appropriate.
It's just things they need.
I'll be honest, when I look at property zone two different ways, it'd be nice to either have it consistent, either scenic or park. I see our law director shaking her head in front of me.
Or institutional.
Nah, whatever would be appropriate, so that way I think that would put the mind at ease for the Pill Corp residents that it's not going anywhere else and being developed. So, but I would suggest if we could just send that to PrAC to have them review.
Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
Would it go to PrAC because it's currently under their jurisdiction, or is it because it would change now?
PrAC merely makes suggestions, but I could bring it up to them.
Or are they the ones that, are they the,
They're a park.
they're the commission?
Advisory
that tells us we
committee.
need more parks.
That would be something that would fall in their purview.
And then if not, trying to change it to scenic, is that something that they would review, or is that something that would probably have to go more to a planning commission to?
Yeah.
So that if that's the case, then bring it back to the planning and zoning to take the planning commission to look at changing that completely to scenic then. Either way, I think it'd be nice to do that.
Either way, it would end up at the planning commission level.
Thank you. The next item we have on here is review of proposed codification of responsibilities for Recreation Committee in section VA5 of the Rules of Council. And the reason I have this here for all of you to look at is because I was noticing in the Rules of Council that recreation does not have a definition. So I've given you all a copy of thoughts on that. If you want to add something, that's fine. But this is what I have. I'll read it. Proposed addition to the Rules of Council 220.05, Rule 5A5. This Recreation Committee The Recreation Committee shall review all legislation and/or other proposed action involving city parks and/or recreation programs which take place in them, and make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to the full council for passage. And then B is shall review all suggestions proposed by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee before they are presented to the full council and make recommendations on them as appropriate. C is shall interview all candidates proposed for appointment to PrAC by the mayor and make a recommendation as to their qualifications before their appointment is considered by the full council. And if you'll notice, as you're looking at your rules of council, 2 committees already have job descriptions. One is finance and one is personnel. And I thought it would be nice for us on recreation to have a description as well.
Are these 3 items here, are these are 3 things that the committee typically does anyway, right?
Not the last one. That's actually appointment review also has a definition within the code. And what's proposed here in item C falls squarely within the purview of the appointment review committee. Already interviews or considers appointments to those boards that are made by either the mayor or council. So that seems to already be encompassed into one of the other boards that does have their definition.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a definition of the committee so it's clear what we do.
Are there any other appointments by the mayor that go to other committees rather than the appointment review committee, like personnel or something
Personnel
like that?
committee would, and they consider certainly questions of some vacancies on council. I know that we've used the personnel committee for that. I'm looking here, appointment review
So planning and zoning usually has
is,
HLC.
its function is to review recommendations of nominees to the city's appointed boards, as well as to any vacancies which may occur on council.
Okay, so all I'm trying to get at is you said C tends to be done by the review committee, but it sounds like there's other committees and council committees that do things that could fall with the appointment review committee too.
Right.
So it's really not really sticking anymore.
Oh, no, and that's not what I meant, that PrAC is what appointment review considers all boards. Yeah, including.
Right. I think the point is that most people get sent to a council committee and the appointment review committee. This has been in the practice in recent years.
Yeah.
And if that council committee should be, in this case, the recreation committee.
Mr. Orser, can you come forward and state your name and address?
Okay, John Orser, 125 East Front Street. I don't have anything more to say. I just wanted to put that out for your consideration.
Thank you.
So is the standard procedure then that people that are being considered for appointment, whatever type of appointment, it goes to both the appropriate committee and the appointment review committee, or just go straight to the appointment review committee? Because I think we've been all on board on that.
I want to say I think you're correct in your statements. I'd have to go back and look, because I know typically PrAC appointments, I know have ended up before rec as well.
Right, just this year they have, but
Yes.
several of them have, and as well as appointment review.
But the only group that is required to do that is the appointment review committee.
Correct.
So whether it goes to a committee or not, it needs to go to the appointment review committee.
Yes, by my reading.
By the ordinances, yes.
What are we basing our determination on in the past as to whether or not it's going to go to a particular committee before it goes to the appointment committee?
That was decided before I got here.
Is there some policy or is it just?
I'm sure there's a history.
Mr. Orser, would you like?
I will add one thing here about the history of the appointment review committee. The appointment, I'm sorry, I have a frog in my throat. The appointment review committee really has no reason to exist because it was created when a former mayor, who was mayor from 1990 to 1993, threw a temper tantrum one day when one of his appointments was turned down and said, I will never make another appointment. So this was a personal decision on his part. Then council created the Appointment Review Committee to basically do that job. Before that happened, people who were being appointed to the boards, as was pointed out, they went to the relevant committee as like, I don't know if we had PREC then, but the people who were going to be on landmarks would go to planning and zoning. People on the street tree commission would go to the safety committee. And so simply an opportunity for them to meet the people they're going to be working with. And the future of the Appointment Review Committee is something to be talked about at another time. But I think the point that is being made is among the various council committees that one committee can review an appointment, can interview a candidate before it goes on to the administration.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
So I do have a question regarding this, the point of conversation at this time. If I recall correctly, I don't believe that anybody who's up for reappointment usually comes before any committee. Am I incorrect in that?
I think there were individuals that came here.
Well, that was the students.
Reappointments have not typically gone back to any particular committee. That usually goes straight to the appointment and the review committee, I thought.
Actually, if I will, Mr. Shannon did come before this committee, as did Will Harbauer.
Those are new appointments. Reappointments to someone filling another term, a second term.
Reappointments take a slightly different route, is my recollection.
Well, Mr. Shannon and Mr. Harbauer are brand new to PREC. They're not reappointments.
What are they, moving forward, is there some written policy that that's the way we look at it? Kind of just the way it's been.
I actually cannot answer that
I guess
question.
if this is an attempt to try to clean it up,
That's what I'm trying to do.
then I would suggest that we do it with respect to all the committees.
Could you speak up, please?
Sorry. I just am suggesting that if this proposal is an attempt to clean up the language, at least with respect to the Recreation Committee, or create some language to clean up and maybe document what the practice should be going forward, that is in fact the purpose of this, and perhaps we should do that with all the committees, so that just some of the committees don't have language like this, some don't.
Yes.
And
If you would like, we could, from the administration standpoint, put together a couple paragraphs on what our process has been, at least the last several years, concerning reappointments and reappointments to the various boards and commissions, and we can send that to this committee for your review. Because I do think it's a little bit of maybe a hodgepodge.
yeah, that would be something that would affect every committee. So,
I'm fine as is. I took the time to do it over the weekend, and just to clean it up and be clear about what we're about, and
yeah, I don't have a problem the way you've done it this morning.
Yeah.
But I guess if we're going to do it for the rec committee, we should probably look at all the committees and make sure that each committee's
Yes.
got something in there that says, well, if there's an appointment that's relevant to my committee, then
I
it goes
would-
to my committee.
I would recommend that this one per se, in particular, and I do agree with what you said. I would recommend that the excuse my scribbles here. I would recommend that the ordinance be prepared for council's consideration on July 30th, which would include the responsibilities we have determined tonight, included in the rules of council for recreation.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
As to the first one, section A, I just want to look at the language so I understand what the intent of the committee is on this. Shall review all legislation or any other proposed action involving city parks
Correct.
and/or the recreation programs which take place in them,
Right.
and make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to the full council for passage. My question does not have anything to do with the legislation. I think that's clear. That's the process we went through this evening. It's the inclusion of the language or any other proposed action involving city parks and/or the recreation programs. This is just me being, I think, a stickler on language here that's very, very broad. At the same time of maybe capturing those things that wouldn't be legislatively approved or even within the purview of city council. Again, I take no issue with the legislation, but I'd like council or the committee to have a discussion about what are you really seeking to obtain here on this or any other proposed action involving city parks? Because I could see that would actually, that could turn into what's already an administrative function if it was the replacement of a park bench or the repair of a water fountain. That is an action involving the city park or the planning of a recreation program that would be more administrative and not fall within council's purview.
I will have that she did put though, to make a recommendation regarding any other proposal.
Correct.
There's no,
The only recommendation has to do with the legislation, so, but you're still reviewing, so that's what I'm trying to understand. What that
You can clean that up by adding one word, legislative, any legislative actions.
that's what she's got.
I do have another.
So the legislative portion makes perfect sense. It's the inclusion of the other and any other action involving a park is overbroad and possibly
What I'm
inappropriate.
saying is you would say any other legislative action involving the parks. And that would remove the issues you're talking about.
If that is the committee's intent on this, I wouldn't have any, I don't have any concern by adding a modifier, but keeping it within a legislative.
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
And we thank you for
Yeah,
noticing.
and I will make mention of this as well. The other reason I brought this forward was I was feeling that the Recreation Committee and was being overlooked several times and going to other committees, things that should have been coming here. And I wanted this to be clear that this is what we're about. So that's the other reason I did it.
Would you have reason for concern for section B then, for the same reason you had reason for concern for section A? Because Prac might be making suggestions that don't require legislative action.
No, I don't have, because that's a review of suggestions, and PrAC has a responsibility for their section of the ordinances to not only report back to the mayor, but to report to council when requested, and I would consider this committee the arm of council that would probably be dealing with PrAC more often. PrAC makes their recommendations to the administration as to what they're seeing as well, so reviewing all suggestions, you have an ex officio member of the PrAC committee as your chairperson. I would think that when she gives her report, she's notifying you to review their suggestions of what they saw. So no, I don't have any issue with that.
Okay.
I do have a question here on part A. I underlined this because I did not see this as part of any other committee here. But it states on here, make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to the full council for passage. That is not a language that's in any of the other committees. As I was trying to review this, and this is the first time I've seen these edits here, and so my question is that something that's going to be added to all the committees where no one can, if someone doesn't want to make a recommendation, then it stays a committee, dies a committee. I didn't think that's the intention because we've had that. If that was the case, we wouldn't have Caterpillar right now.
Yeah, there have been other council members that have threatened to bring legislation if the committee didn't bring it forward, non-committee members.
Probably the most comparable portion of the code is the finance committee. And it's consideration or evaluation are the words that they use in finance committee, that you evaluate the legislation. It doesn't necessarily die in committee. It can still go forward to the council with no recommendation or a recommendation against, but you evaluate it, but not per se shall make a recommendation prior to it going, I think is what you're.
And I think that if I'm looking at this, it's saying that the committee has to make a recommendation whether for or against it if it goes to council.
Well, could be a recommendation not to pass it.
No, but it would have to have a recommendation.
But one way or the other.
No. But I would like to see that change to that they either have that removed or just continue to talk about evaluating the proposed legislation and not have the recommendation before said legislation is presented to full council for passage. I would like that part removed. I understand why to make sure that things come to rec committee. I'm just concerned that we could have things stall that don't necessarily need to stall in the future, looking maybe 20 years from now, there's a different makeup.
If they have a recommendation, it has to go to council, whether it's yes or no, and council can overrule a no.
they could also have something to sit in committee if it's based
What
off
I
this.
just
It
said
says,
is that they have to make a recommendation. They can't just let it sit there.
that does not say that they have to make a recommendation. It says that they shall review or any other proposed, and then they can make a recommendation, but that doesn't mean they have to make that recommendation that same night.
If you want to put that language in, that would be fine. But they must make a recommendation.
Would you repeat
and
that
get
again,
it to
Mr.
council.
Smith?
Although I didn't actually have any language there. It just says that it doesn't say that they have to make the recommendation the same evening. So my suggestion is that it's removed because once it's brought up in rec committee,
Okay,
Doesn't
so
really matter.
you want to remove recommendation before said legislation is presented to full council for passage?
it's because it actually says up here prior to that shall review all legislation involving city parks anyway, so it's going to have to come here.
Councilman Smith, if you'd like to maintain consistency, there's that language that exists in the Finance Committee section, there are definitions under A1.
Where's that at? I did not see that.
It's in the actual codified ordinances. So the Recreation Committee falls under 5A.
Yeah, I'm looking through here.
So the Finance Economic Development Committee, per the ordinances, shall review, shall evaluate any proposed legislation involving tax code, shall review the proposed zoning principalities, shall consider other matters, shall evaluate any legislation intended to promote economic development, monitor any projects. It doesn't go as far as to say making a recommendation. It's just there's 3 points of shall evaluate any legislation.
No, and I think that that's fine. What I'm concerned is that we pigeonhole ourselves, that we have to make a recommendation before anything can go to council.
Right.
And that's what I just want to review on that portion, and maybe that's just ultimately really what I want to see. That line remover says make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to full council for passage. And I don't think anybody's going to. We haven't seen that in the past where someone put something forward that hasn't had a review. But if it's supposed to come here to have a conversation, it's already stated in there.
What's your thoughts, Justin?
Well, first maybe me, but it's like nothing, it still would have to come to committee for discussion, and that's what this does have that language in it. It has to come to committee, but it can't still move forward after it goes through committee.
So how would you propose to read that on A?
I know there's a lot of changes going through on here, so I don't want to make any changes for some of the things that have already been mentioned before, but I just believe that removing the and make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to full council for passage is removed. That's not part of any other committees. I don't see a need to put that on just one.
I guess we were talking about trying to make everything sort of the same, so that could be added possibly as well.
I'm sorry.
We were talking about the other committees, so they all have definitions, and you could probably put that on there as well.
Well, what happens if it's an emergency ordinance and no recommendation comes from the committee? Let's say that it's we got the water contract coming up and it comes into committee, and let's say the committee doesn't want to make a move on that, and nothing happens. I mean, that's really what you don't want to see happen either.
I guess it-
Full council can overrule a committee. That's why there's 3 people on a committee.
If this is put on there, I believe that would not allow that.
No, that's not what it says at all.
I guess I don't understand this myself. Make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to the full council for passage.
The
I just
committee
think
would-
that's what something we would do anyway.
You would think, but what happens if the recommendations never made? Basically, we're saying here that the committee can override the desire of council. So 3 members of council
Doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that, John.
shall review all legislation and they shall make a recommendation before said legislation is presented to full council for the passage, unless there's punctuation missing. I don't know.
I don't know what you don't understand about it.
I'm just trying to make it clear, like I said. So,
And what the law director said is if you use the same language as the finance committee's section on that, then you're being in accordance with the rest of the thing.
the finance committee doesn't actually have that line in there.
That's correct. So I would just take this and utilizing the same language from the finance committee. And shall evaluate, the committee shall
So that's what I
evaluate the
would say.
legislation.
We either need to get that language tonight, or I would hold off on
Okay, what,
voicing my opinion on what I would do until I see the final language.
I would prefer to have a little bit more time to kind of digest everything as well once we get these suggestions in place.
We'll get there.
Madam Chair, would you like me to take that language, send it to you, you can disperse it to your committee to consider at the next meeting?
I would very much appreciate that.
Okay.
We can go there.
Okay. So we've tabled that. Other business. I have a report on the PrAC meeting, July 1st, 2019. In my role as a liaison between the committee and PrAC, I attended their last meeting, July 1st, which was held for the first time here in council chambers. PrAC has historically met at a different city park each meeting. No specific recommendations for the Recreation Committee were made. One member speaking individually voiced her disapproval of splash pads. However, much of the discussion at the meeting involved the law director and city administrator explaining the PrAC members in attendance, how they can organize themselves to function more efficiently. Since PrAC and all other mayor-appointed boards are composed of volunteer, unelected members, it would seem to be unnecessary and confusing to citizens to deal with them for each board to adopt its own rules. A better solution would be for all city bodies which deal with the public to use the same rules which are already in place for council. So I propose that legislative action be taken to address the situation.
So this isn't meeting minutes, this is your thoughts and.
This is about my report about the meeting, and then my additional thoughts relating to that.
I guess I was under the impression they were going to have a minute submitted for this meeting to report,
Well,
but
I am their liaison, so I attended the meeting.
so did I.
I did see you there. Anybody else have any other questions, thoughts?
Also, your opinion portion of that report was it, are there currently no roles?
Can you hear me? I actually can't hear you over here, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I don't have much of a voice right now. Are there currently no roles, or what are the roles in PrAC?
Well,
What are the guidelines?
having attending their meetings, that I've witnessed, it seems like there's a lot of disorganization. And there's not really anybody that's clearly in charge. One person kind of appointed themselves, but they never really had an election. I can't vote, I am an ex officio. But I think that there needs to be a little bit more action to address the situation, so it's clear what they do.
So much just kind of took over the whole committee without.
That's what I saw at some meetings back. I witnessed that.
Has PrAC sent over a copy of the meeting minutes?
They have.
Can that be distributed? I would love to see.
I don't know if we've got the most recent meeting
Right.
because they
I
got
understand
those
that
in
one,
July, right?
I would be curious to see the last couple of years' meetings at this point with some of the
We
things that
have-
have been said here.
We do have some of them. They were working on compiling from our discussions at the last PrAC meeting. We do have some. I think we have the May ones. Mr. Eckel was able to get. Greg Kerr had them, and we were trying to put together some other ones. We also have some from several years ago.
Did you ever
that we
find that-
located. Ms.
that binder?
Pantorno's working on it, trying to put them all together.
And as we receive them, we're adding them to our website.
I don't know if either of you found it when you were searching, but there was a Mrs. Kopp who took notes from the committee, and I used to sit on the PrAC committee in the early 2000s, and it was a lot better run back then. I remember the city council liaison, we had a couple of different ones because of the change in council. We had Mrs. Verkin, and then we had Mr. Lawless. And they seemed to run both between the two council people and the group that people seemed to be relaxed, they worked well together. In fact, we used to meet in the meeting room where we go for executive session now. So that's what I recall. And the thought back then was to make suggestions and then send them to the Recreation Committee, which we did or didn't, and we report on our parks. We actually did actual reports that we had to hand in regarding the parks. So I remember it being a very organized committee back then.
Are you looking for some action tonight? First, take some type of action?
I was hoping something would happen.
You know what? What is you looking for?
Well, as I mentioned, the rules of council information that I had, I was hoping that we could send that forward regarding that.
I thought you meant for Pratt.
No, I mean for what we're talking about right now, correct?
Well, I would like some kind of legislative action to be taken to address the situation. Yes.
Which is what, put some,
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm
to
asking.
put some bylaws? in
Yes,
place?
that's what I'm asking.
Is that legislative?
The legislation that's currently on the books actually says that they have to have their bylaws. They're working on, that was one of the action items that everyone on the committee left with that evening, was that they would be proposing some bylaws for the committee to consider. The current ordinances say that that's within the purview of the committee, that they should adopt their own bylaws.
Okay. You'll get him, for them to create some bylaws, you're on the, you can oversee it.
Well, I mean, it isn't really what PRAC's really historically been about. It's not been about creating laws. I mean, that's our job.
Not laws, bylaws.
No, just bylaws, the guidelines for them on how to conduct themselves. Which is what you want, right?
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
That law's already on the books. And that's what they're working towards.
Let's wait to see if they come up with that, would be my suggestion. And you're part of it, you're gonna be part of putting those together.
Well, I can't vote because I'm ex officio.
Well, yeah, you got some, so, can't vote. So
Yeah, I could make mention.
I think we have some things there, so.
Okay. Your thoughts, Mr. Smith?
Pratt was supposed to come up with their bylaws, and we pay them a whole lot of money to do that.
Yes.
So it would be, as a volunteer board, if they're willing to do all that, I'd say let them. I think that they wanted to grab the bull by the horns and try to get this done. Let's give them that opportunity and see what they
We
come up
have
with.
sent them maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 sets of bylaws from other types of park boards and or rec commissions from this area as well as out of state, so they have a starting place that they can go through and look and select things that they think make sense for them.
Have you seen any of those?
I have not recently.
We've sent them to the
Not
chair of the PREC, and that person was taking it upon themselves to distribute it to the members.
So, I need to have to, okay.
Oh, I certainly absolutely would, but I think that we should definitely see what those are before the committee and then have a discussion about that.
If I recall correctly, I believe that there was one item that they were going to discuss and have us potentially review. That was changing their actual meeting dates to more coincide with this. Am I correct in that?
You are. You are. Right now, their meeting dates are established by codified ordinance, so that would actually go in front of the city council ultimately as an ordinance change. And it's really just to conform with, I think, what their current practice is of how they're meeting March or April through October or November, as well as the location being here, which gives them the benefit of having it recorded, both audio and visual, so.
So they're no longer going to be in the parks and having meetings?
They're free to meet in the parks if they want to schedule those meetings, and then as long as they announce them in a public session that the next meeting will be held, say, at Rotary Park or at Municipal Park, that's permitted.
No. I think that they could be a little bit more organized, but that's just my observation.
Let's see what they come up with. Are we giving them a deadline, or do we have a deadline?
No, we're gonna at their next meeting.
If I recall correctly, I believe that they're trying to do what they can to get organized because they've seen some of the issues, and that's one of the reasons they're doing the bylaws.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay, we'll give a report on crack. And anybody else has anything else? I will move to adjourn.
Good, good.
Okay. Adjourn.